Welcome to the African Alliance podcast, the Brilliant series, brought to you by the Brilliant Consortium's Community Engagement and Advocacy Workstream. This series introduces you to the scientists, researchers, and community activists driving innovation and social progress across our partner sites. In each episode, we'll hear from those in the front lines, whether they're uncovering groundbreaking scientific discoveries or working to empower communities through grassroots activism. These conversations give you an inside look at how collaboration between science and community is transforming lives, challenging systems, and creating solutions that can change the world. In this episode, I'll be speaking to the Harare Health and Research Consortium's Dr. Nyaradzo Mgodi. Dr. Mgodi, from as far back as I can remember, you have been such a feature in the landscape of HIV. You've been a consistent leader, you've been a consistent thought leader, a consistent visionary, an individual that activists and researchers alike have constantly referred to as a safe space to learn, to help us understand key scientific principles, to help us break down science that at times is overwhelming to us non-scientists and non-researchers. And so throughout these decades that you've been at the forefront of responding to some of these public health challenges that impact our world and our lives, what has been consistent for you in terms of how science has come to the table, in terms of how science has regarded communities? Because of course we're reminded time and time again, and it's almost become a moot point, but will never become irrelevant, the fact that communities are absolutely critical and essential parts of research. And of course, research cannot happen without communities. But throughout your many, many years of being at the forefront of research and thinking about solutions to some of these problems, what has kept you in the space? What has kept you focused? What has kept your fire alive?
I think the first thing that keeps me going is I've got this deep-rooted, deep-seated love for women. I love people. I genuinely love my community. I genuinely love the people that I work with, that I work for, and it is it's my wish to see that every Zimbabwean woman, every woman in Africa, and every woman out there, and anyone who needs our services, they have the services that they need, they have the options that they need so that they can make the choices that they need to prevent HIV. So I want the women, I want all our clients, all our participants, our communities to have quality health services. So that is what keeps me going. And until we get there, I'm not going to stop. Yeah. So I am going as long as I'm still lucid, as long as I'm still able to stand on my 2 feet, as long as I'm still safe to my participants, I'm going to keep going, or until we beat HIV.
You know, for years, engaging communities, we've really steered away from words like experimental. And now here comes this consortium called Brilliant that's using the word experimental, that's using the word discovery. And of course, you know, in a context where vaccine hesitancy, you know, has a historical context. Of course, science and research has not always been kind to Black and brown folks and people of color. Of course, that has radically changed over the last few decades. But as community activists who have really stayed away from this idea of experimental research and discovery medicine, we're now in a place where this consortium called Brilliant is boldly saying, look, we want to try this idea. We want to see if this idea will work. What is your message to communities who, you know, they look at the TV screens? During COVID, of course, we looked at the screens and we saw that people in the global north were accessing vaccines that we had made possible through participation in trials. We now look at lenacapavir, which has received global acclaim and prestige, but we now know that the countries that hosted these trials, in particular in Latin America, the pharmaceutical company has now refused to make this available to participants in those countries. At the height of COVID, we saw some scientists and researchers, telling us on public calls that, you want us to engage communities. We're not here for that. We have to do the science because people are dying. We'll engage them later, but for now we have to save their lives. So throughout all of this noise, throughout all of the developments, the headlines, the politicking, et cetera, at the core of it is really around what message do you have to communities who we, of course, will rely on continuously in the future to support research, to support, be part of these trials. What is your message to communities to really give them peace of mind when it comes to the potential of access? What are your thoughts around post-trial access in terms of those who have participated in research and what their current reality is? Are you concerned?
So in terms of post-trial access, I'm, as you know, besides being a researcher, I'm also a scientific reviewer for the Medical Research Council of Zimbabwe. So I'm really into ethics in terms of we need to uphold ethics as we conduct studies. So even as I review protocols like similar to the protocols that we conduct, I'm always looking at the researchers section on post-trial access. What is it that they are going to do in terms of post-trial access? So I think it goes without saying that it's something that must be included as we start studies, as we start trials. I mean, these will be like further along trials, not the discovery medicine trials, but as people, as researchers conduct phase 3 trials, we really need to know what is the plan for post-trial access. And it shouldn't just be post-trial access for the sake of post-trial access. No, it should fit into the local healthcare system. If my Department of Health requires A, B, C, D before a client can access this intervention, this drug, then the researcher must also ensure that whatever they are doing in terms of post-trial access, they should ensure that it is done. That's the researcher. What about the pharmaceutical company? I'm also an advocate at heart, so sometimes I find it hard to speak. Sometimes I don't know whether I'm speaking as a researcher or as an advocate. We need the pharmaceutical companies to begin with the end in mind. If this intervention is successful, how is it going to be rolled out in the local community that we conducted the study in? Is it going to be affordable? Is it going to be accessible? Is it going to be acceptable? Let us begin with the end in mind. Is it going to be deliverable? Yeah, so those are the questions that the pharmaceutical company should ask themselves, the sponsor, the researcher, even the departments of health as we review protocols. What is the end? What is the end game? We just don't want to come with a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful product which people cannot afford, which people cannot accept, which cannot be deliverable, which cannot be delivered, which cannot be scaled up. So to cut a long story short, post-trial access is very, 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 very important, and it must begin at the beginning. So discovery medicine, what I would like to bring to my communities, I think our community is a bit different because if I look, I'm a researcher, and most of the time I'm asked by my regulators, they ask me, this product that you want to investigate in our community, when was the first, when were the safety studies, and where were the early phase studies conducted. Why didn't we do that in Zimbabwe? Why don't we have our own data in Zimbabwe? Why is it that we only get these studies as phase 3 and so forth, 2B and so forth? So I'm really happy that we are now able to take part in discovery medicine. It builds a lot of capacity in terms of the healthcare system, in terms of the equipment, in terms of facilities, in terms of community knowledge about how drugs, how vaccines are developed, what is the spectrum. You know, we become a better community, a better nation after taking part in discovery medicine. And being a scientist, I know that at the end, it's not just about academic, it's not just about pecuniary gains, but it is also about the person at the end of the spectrum. What are they going to benefit because of all this? They are going to benefit good health care, good quality medical care. So I'm happy that Zimbabwe, HHRC, we are part of Brilliant and we'll be taking part in discovery medicine. And this is what the community needs to know, that we need to start at the beginning. We need to have African solutions for African problems. I mean, if we are not going to be taking part in discovery medicine, how can we ever get an African solution for an African problem?
If we are saying communities and activists and researchers and scientists need to talk about post-trial access early, is the stage of discovery medicine the best stage to discuss eventual access? Should we be asking questions now of the Brilliant Consortium, for example, around what happens if and when we get these fruits of research in the context of Brilliant? Is Brilliant the place to be asking about post-trial access and what access looks like in terms of us doing this early stage work?
That's a difficult question because I've just said that we need to begin with the end in mind. There's need to balance. We don't want to give communities to promise them something which is not there. So what the way I would look at post-trial access during discovery medicine is I would do modeling to see if this product is found to be working, if this vaccine is found to be working, how much would it cost in Zimbabwe? How much would it cost in Uganda? And you look at market segmentation. Would it be affordable? Would it be acceptable? So you need to have concurrent domains running. So as we look into the discovery itself, into the vaccine itself, into the immunogen, or if it's another thing, if we look at discovery, we also need to look at the potential market. Can it be manufactured in middle countries? Is it acceptable? Is it affordable? So I think the pharmaceuticals, I think they owe us as research communities, as researchers living in those communities. I think we are owed that information.
You know, people have just come out of this HIV R4P conference, lots of exciting work being done. Of course, apart from lenacapavir, there's drugs that are, you know, dual purpose, there's contraceptive properties, HIV prevention, PrEP loaded douches. So a whole lot of innovation in science, et cetera, et cetera. You know, of course, we've got PrEP, we've got male and female condoms. So with all of these, with all of this movement on the prevention landscape, with this basket growing bigger and bigger, why do we still need a vaccine?
So the answer is not as straightforward as one would like to think. It's not just about options. You know, we've done many studies where people were asked, what is it that you would like in terms of HIV prevention? Some said, I want something which is short acting. Some said, I want something which is long acting. Some said, I want an injectable. I want oral. So it depends on the, there are many attributes which make a person choose one option over another. So it could be because of safety, it could be because of efficacy, it could be because of the route of administration. It could be because they don't want a drug in their body. Maybe they don't want an antiretroviral-based intervention. They want an immune therapy. They want something which resembles normalcy as much as possible. So those are some of the attributes that we need to continue working on. What about side effects? If we can have a vaccine with less side effects than lenacapavir, than cabotegravir, will be good. If I can have a vaccine without those complications, so by all means, allow me to have this vaccine. Yeah, so there are many reasons why we still need a vaccine. You've just talked about the issues about affordability. Some countries, upper middle income countries, might not be able to access lenacapavir as we've been talking about in the past 2 weeks. Brazil, for example, as much as they've tried to roll out oral PrEP, we know that for every one person they put on oral PrEP, for example, they had 4 new infections. So in that case, it means maybe these interventions are not the right interventions for them. They need HIV vaccines. So there are many reasons really why we need vaccines. We know that when we are dealing with infectious diseases, the most impactful public health intervention against infectious diseases, infectious conditions is a vaccine. So yes, we still need a vaccine.
This is the Brilliant series of podcasts brought to you by the Consortium's Community Engagement and Advocacy Workstream, introducing you to the scientists, researchers, and community activists at the center of HIV vaccine discovery. Today, I'm speaking to Harare Health and Research Consortium's Dr. Nyaradzo Mgodi. This podcast is partially aimed at community members who for many years have, been given and presented so many scientific terms around prevention, treatment, care, support. Can you explain to us where the research that the Brilliant Consortium is working on will fit in? Is it prevention? It's also not quite a vaccine yet either. How do we place the work of Brilliant amongst the various other scientific projects happening around HIV?
Brilliant is really it's really brilliant, so because it's focusing on many facets, it's not just going to be looking at clinical trials. Yes, we are working on discovering homegrown immunogens for Africans by Africans. But there's a lot in terms of capacity strengthening. There will be scholars, strengthening of our researchers, upcoming researchers, community and stakeholder engagement. So we'll be working with many stakeholders, the departments of health, regular lay people, media, advocates. So Brilliant really spans a spectrum of activities. It's not just limited to the discovery medicine itself. There will be a lot of activities that will be happening. So Brilliant, really, our mandate, we are looking at coming up with a vaccine, as you might have heard, and this is really what we are doing. But in terms of HIV prevention, cure, all the facets of HIV, we do not work in silos. So you find that the work that we are doing in Brilliant, even though we set up to discover new immunogens, to work at an HIV preventive vaccine, the information that we get from Brilliant will be fundamental, and I'm positive that the information that we'll get will contribute towards HIV cure. It will contribute towards a therapeutic HIV vaccine. So I don't think it will limit us just to a preventive HIV vaccine, but will also gather important data, information in terms of HIV prevention, in terms of HIV treatment, in terms of the cure research agenda.
So, during COVID, of course, lots of myth and disinformation, lots of mistrust. One of the most powerful papers that came out, in our view, of COVID around myth and disinformation was that one of the single biggest factors that drove communities away from vaccines was their mistrust in their governments, in their health authorities. They were saying, but we don't trust these folks in good times. We're not going to trust them now that they bring in a vaccine. And so in South Africa, of course, we laid charges against our Chief Justice for the comments that he made, likening vaccines to the mark of the beast, et cetera, et cetera. So with that happening, and of course, mis and disinformation was not unique to South Africa or Zimbabwe or anywhere in the world. It was really a constant refrain. There was mis and disinformation. There were the conspiracy theories, everything from, Bill Gates trying to eradicate Africans, to 3G, to 5G, chips, to cell phone towers being, activating vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of saw an entire spectrum of myths and disinformation and controversy. What has been your experience in this first year of setting up Brilliant and the work of the Brilliant Consortium in Zimbabwe when it comes to coming off the back of a pandemic like COVID, where there was such heavy attention on vaccines, how they are developed and researched, et cetera, and now setting up the work of Brilliant? Because of course we know that mis and disinformation has at times really strong footholds, but also directly impact communities' confidence in vaccines, in research. It hinders our ability to retain trial participants, et cetera, et cetera. What has been your experience in this first year of setting up Brilliant in Zimbabwe, in the context of mis and disinformation around vaccines?
I think COVID forced everyone to understand how research is done. Initially there were vaccines and people were saying, can we have those vaccines if they haven't been researched in our populations? Others are saying, no, we want the vaccines like yesterday. So it gave the communities the opportunity to understand how research is done. And with that in mind, people really now appreciate why we do discovery medicine, why we do first in human studies, why we do early phase studies, why we do phase 2, phase 3, why we do implementation sciences. So that has, COVID gave us the opportunity to really engage communities at a massive scale in a short time. We had been doing it for all my previous studies, but we were doing it maybe at a smaller scale. But COVID allowed all this information to be disseminated at a very large scale. Of course, there were myths and misconceptions. There was talk about anti-vaxxers, and it will always be there. Even if you look at contraception, look at the successes. Zimbabwe has been highly successful in provision of contraception. But when you rewind back, you see that when biomedical contraception was being offered, there was a talk about decimating the African population and so forth and so forth. So this will always be there. What we need to do is to preempt the myths and misconceptions, the misinformation that might arise. We need to have leadership that understands what we are doing. We don't, it's rather unfortunate that you have leadership that talk about the mark of the beast and so forth. That is really uncalled for. We need to have well-informed leadership. We need to have advisors who talk through science with leadership until they understand, so that when they do go into public, they can say the right things. So we need to empower, we need to build capacity in our leadership, whether it's political leadership, whether it's community leadership, whether it's faith-based leadership. We need leadership to know what it is that we are doing, why we are doing what we are doing, and what good will it be for our people. And I think once the leaders understand that, we will have taken care of a majority of misinformation. We also need to work with media, electronic, print, any type of media, so that they understand what is it that we are doing in Brilliant, so that they can disseminate the correct information and we don't have to worry about misinformation. But of course, there will be people here and there who will be peddling their own agenda in terms of misinformation. What we need our communities to be able to do, to be empowered to do, is to have discernment, to be able to decide what I'm hearing, does it conform to the Ministry of Health and Child Care's agenda? Is it what the minister said the other time I was listening to him on radio? Does it fall within the National Development Strategy? Does it fall within Education 5.0 of our universities? So we need our communities to be able to discern, to say to themselves, to ask themselves, what I'm hearing, is it in line with our strategies as a country?
You know, as we're nearing the end of this discussion, Dr. Mgodi, your leadership of clinical trials and clinical research has really spanned many, many years. What, in your view, when you sit back and reflect, how has community engagement evolved over the years? Community engagement in all of its forms. Do you think it's evolved over the many years you've been running and overseeing clinical trials? And how?
That's a very, very important question. The quick question is yes, community involvement and engagement has evolved. So when I started, I don't think I knew what GPP was. I don't know if we had GPP then, but now we've got good participatory practices which really mandate us to engage the communities right from concepts, right from the idea of what we want to do. We are engaging communities. I think in the past, we used to now say, right, I work in Chitungwiza, I would go to Chitungwiza. Those were years ago. You would now go to Chitungwiza to say, I'd like to conduct this study in Chitungwiza. And I'm going to be recruiting from areas A, B, C, D. That is how the olden day researcher used to do it. But now when I look at our community advisory board, I look at the various stakeholders that we work with. We are working with them right from the beginning. For another study, which I'm looking at discovery medicine, because I've just started discovery medicine, and Brilliant is my second consortium in terms of discovery medicine. We've just recently, a year ago, we had a stakeholders meeting where we asked stakeholders from various sectors of life, if we look at this product, how would you want it to be? And they told us we want it to be like ABC. And we took those sentiments, we took them back to the product developer, to the pharmaceutical company to say that people in Zimbabwe, South Africa, Kenya, they like this product to be shaped like ABCD. And the product developer listened to that and they changed the product to suit what the communities had said. We had never done that before. So there's been evolution, positive evolution of community engagement. We are working with communities right from the inception of the idea. Can we use this to prevent HIV? What about a vaccine? We are working with them right from the beginning. They are working on protocol development. They are working on informed consent forms. They are working on implementation, recruitment, they are working on retention, they are working on dissemination of results. Yeah, and we've always been doing that from the beginning, you know, results dissemination, but we've moved the graph to the left to involve communities right from discovery medicine. So I'm really happy, and it's one of my proudest moments as a researcher. I can positively state that, yes, now we are meaningfully engaging communities. You know, at times, in the past, sometimes one felt that maybe I'm just ticking a checkbox. You know, has community been involved? Tick, yes. Is there a community advisory board? Tick, yes. But you know, it wasn't like meaningful. So now we really, you can tell it's tangible. That's the word I'm looking for. There's tangible community involvement. You know, there's so much GPP in what we do that I can say that there's been positive evolution of community engagement, community involvement. We are involving our communities as co-designers of our protocols, co-designers of interventions that will be rolling out in the community. As a result, the communities, they've got ownership of what we are doing. This is now a community study. It's a community consortium. That's really what I want Brilliant to be. I want my community to own Brilliant wherever I'm working, whether it's in Harare, Chitungwiza, Bridge, wherever I'm working in. I want the community to have ownership of this consortium so that, you know, we are in it together, for us, by us. Yeah. So really that's I can talk on and on and on about how now communities have really risen to the challenge. They are being involved, number one, but also they are active. They are being proactive. They are not just passive recipients of information. They are working hard. The communities, whether it's community advisory boards, whether it's advocates, whether it's media, I'm just saying now that we are actively engaging various sectors of community. When I started, we didn't have media engagement. We didn't have training of media personnel, but now we are doing that. They now know the language in terms of vaccines. What is a vaccine? What is a broadly neutralizing antibody? What is a small molecule? So we are learning as you go, and I'm not saying that we've reached the pinnacle in terms of community engagement. We are still learning. But what I can say now is we are now doing it far much better than we've done in the past. And we are doing it meaningfully and very well. I think to me as a person, I talked about Brilliant being important to the communities, but you know, I've been asked by the Research Council of Zimbabwe. They said to me, "You're just drawing blood. You know, we didn't send you to school just to be drawing blood. You are intelligent. You know, you are highly learned. You know what you do. So what is in it for you?" Yeah. So in terms of Brilliant and the other Discovery Medicine Consortium that I'm working on, I'm really happy to be part of this, because gone are the days when we Black scientists, a Black woman like me, gone are the days when I was just being used to fill a quota. Is there a Black woman on the research team? Is there a Black woman speaking at HIV R4P? Is there a Black woman at AIDS 2024? Gone are the days. Why am I talking about this now? It's because there's really, I think, Brilliant and Matrix, the other consortium that I work on, they've really done a good job in terms of decolonizing health research. You know, we are no longer just tokens. I'm now doing this. I'm an African woman in Africa leading this, you know, because in the past it was just handed to us, but now we are working on this as Africans. So for Africans, by Africans.
And to use one of your favorite words, Womandla.
Omandla.
Dr. Nyaradzo Mgodi, national PI for the Brilliant Consortium in Zimbabwe, longtime activist, researcher, comrade, thinker, mentor, and ally. Thank you so much for your time today on this brilliant podcast. We look forward to working with you in the next 4 years and continuing to see some of the amazing developments that come out of African-led science for Africa by Africans. Really, really grateful for your time and much appreciated. You've been listening to the African Alliance podcast, the Brilliant Series, bringing you these incredible stories of passion, innovation, and change that take us a step closer to an HIV vaccine. We're constantly inspired by the work being done by our guests, and I hope you are too. The work doesn't stop here. There's always more to learn, more to do, and more to connect with. Stay curious, stay engaged, and we'll be back soon with another inspiring episode. From pioneering scientific research to impactful community activism, the individuals we feature on this show are not just changing their fields, they're shaping the future. To learn more about the Brilliant Consortium and how you can get involved, visit africanalliance.org.za and follow us on social media. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the podcast so more people can hear these powerful stories.